I knew something was wrong the second the gate attendant stopped smiling. My sister's twins were already halfway through the Disneyland turnstiles, clutching the red envelopes my parents had handed them that morning like they'd won some game. My son, Eli, stood beside me in the Anaheim heat with his little backpack on, fingers hooked through the straps, trying not to look confused. The woman scanned the first ticket, then the second. Her screen flashed. She looked up at the kids, then at the tickets again. "I'm sorry," she said, voice suddenly flat. "These were reported stolen this morning. I need to call security." Everything around us kept moving. Families pushing strollers, kids wearing mouse ears, music from somewhere near the entrance. My sister Dana going pale so fast it almost looked gray. My mother's mouth opening and closing without sound. My father stepping forward with that offended posture he used whenever reality stopped cooperating with him. And my son just looked at me, not crying yet, not even speaking, just looking at me like he was trying to understand how once again he had ended up standing outside while everyone else got to go in. My throat got tight so fast it hurt because this hadn't started at the gate. It had started 3 hours earlier in the hotel breakfast area, when my mother slid Disneyland tickets across the table to Dana's kids and said, "Bright as anything, here we go." Perfect age for the magic. Eli had smiled then. He was 11, quiet, and still young enough to believe adults sometimes forgot things by accident. He waited. I waited, too. My father buttered his toast. Dana helped her kids zip their hoodies. My mother sipped Afi and never once looked at my son. Finally, Eli asked softly, "Grandma, where's mine?" My mother didn't even flinch. She just said, "Your boy is too sensitive for crowds anyway. Your boy, not Eli. Not her grandson's name, just your boy." Like he was some extra item I'd brought by mistake. Dana gave a little shrug into her orange juice and added, "Honestly, he'd probably melt down by lunch." That was a lie. A lazy one. Eli was sensitive. Yes, he hated loud fireworks and too much noise all at once. He wore headphones at school assemblies. He liked maps, trains, and drawing buildings in neat little pencil lines. He was polite to a fault. He thanked waiters. He held doors open. He always remembered birthdays. He was not a problem. He just made them uncomfortable because he didn't act like Dana's boys, who were loud and reckless and treated every room like a wrestling mat. I remember my hand tightening around my coffee cup. I remember thinking, not here, not now. Because if I let myself react right then in front of him, it would become another family scene where I was called dramatic and ungrateful, and I was tired. So tired. I'm Eliza. I was 38 then, living in Phoenix, working as an operations manager for a dental supply company. Divorced for 6 years. 1 child, 1 mortgage, 1 life built out of spreadsheets, second chances, and saying yes too often to people who never said thank you. My parents lived in Nevada. Dana lived 20 minutes from them with her husband and twin boys. Since my divorce, I had become what my family likes to call the reliable one. That meant I paid for things. Not once in a while, constantly. I covered my parents' property tax bill the year my father messed up the timing. I paid for the new refrigerator when theirs died. I set up automatic weekly transfers for my mother, after she cried on the phone about prescriptions and groceries. $250 every Friday. So small, they said, compared to what I earned. So helpful, so temporary. Temporary turned into 3 years. When Dana's husband was between jobs, I paid for their boys' school clothes one August because the twins had grown like weeds. When my parents wanted everyone together for Christmas in a rental cabin, I paid the deposit. When my father decided the family needed one proper vacation before the kids got too old, I paid for the suite upgrade and half the airfare. Every time. The same script. You're better with money. You know how to make things work. We'll get you back. They never got me back. And every single time I told myself it was fine, I also watched them do the little things to Eli. At Thanksgiving, they bought each grandchild a personalized ornament. Eli got a plain candy cane with no name. At Dana's barbecue, the twins got matching baseball jerseys. Eli was told he could keep score. At my mother's birthday dinner, she framed school photos of all the grandkids for the hallway wall. Eli's school picture was missing. She said she must have misplaced it. I knew what all of that meant. I just kept pretending it meant less than it did because once you say something out loud, you can't go back to calling it a misunderstanding. And that morning at the hotel, with Disneyland 10 minutes away and my son sitting there while everyone discussed him like he wasn't in the room, the pattern finally stood up in full daylight. I said, "We're not doing this." My father gave me that tired look he used when he wanted to imply I was embarrassing myself. "Eliza, don't start," he said. Dana leaned back in her chair. "He doesn't even like rides." Eli looked down at his hands. That did it. Not the words, not even my mother's face. His hands, small, still folded together in his lap so he wouldn't have to show anyone they were shaking. I should have pushed back then. I should have taken him and left before the shuttle even arrived. But there's a special kind of stupidity that comes from hoping people will correct themselves if given one more chance. So, I stood up, took Eli with me, and said we'd meet them downstairs. In the elevator, he asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I swallowed so hard it felt like glass. "No, baby." He nodded like he wanted to believe me. Okay. That one word nearly broke me. Back in our room, he sat on the edge of the bed while I looked at my phone. There in my banking app was the account I had been pretending not to resent, the shared emergency account my mother and I still both had access to because I'd opened it 2 years earlier after one of her many money panics. It was supposed to be for bills, repairs, medication, real emergencies. Only I was the one filling it. By that morning, it held a little over $9,400. Part of it was earmarked for a new roof deposit on my parents' house. Part of it was simply cushion money because my father liked knowing it was there, and because I had set up the account, I could move every dollar out of it in under 2 minutes. I stared at the screen. This was the moment. Not a speech, not a threat, not a family argument in a parking lot, just a clean decision. I asked Eli, "Do you want to go home?" He blinked. "Are we not going?" "No." He looked toward the window, toward the park we could almost see from the hotel. Then he did something that made my heart ache more than if he'd cried. He said very carefully, "That's okay," like he was trying to make it easier for me. I sat beside him and put my hand over his. "It's not okay," I said. "And none of this is because of you." Then I opened the banking app. I transferred every cent from the shared account into my personal savings. I removed my mother's linked debit card. I disabled overdraft coverage tied to my checking. Then I canceled the Friday auto transfer. $250 weekly. Off. A screen popped up asking if I was sure. I hit confirm. Then I opened the payment portal for the roofing company because, yes, I had set that up too. My father had asked me to just put it on your card for now, since I had better rewards and he'd settle up later. The deposit hadn't processed yet. I canceled the authorization. Another confirmation. Another quiet click. That was it. No yelling, no shaking voicemail, no last warning, just screens changing from active to canceled while my son sat beside me in dinosaur socks and tried to act brave. I texted my mother. "We're not going to the park. We're heading home." Then another. "Do not use those tickets." And finally, "You are off my accounts. I won't fund a family my son isn't part of." She replied almost instantly, "Don't be ridiculous." Then, those tickets were already distributed. Then, "You always do this when you feel emotional." I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, my father called. Then Dana. Then my mother again. I put my phone face down and started packing. Eli helped zip the suitcase. He moved slowly, like he was afraid one wrong motion would make the whole day worse. When he picked up the Mickey ears I had bought the night before as a surprise for the park, he just held them for a second. I took them gently and tucked them into the side pocket. "We'll keep those," I said. He nodded. On the drive back toward Arizona, he cried. Not loudly. That would have been easier. He just sat in the passenger seat with his face turned to the window and tears slipping down one after another while he tried to stay quiet. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other open on the center console in case he wanted it. About an hour in, he put his hand in mine, and I thought with this terrible clarity they had done this enough. Enough little cuts. Enough exclusions with polite smiles. Enough treating him like a burden while cashing my help like clockwork. Around Barstow, my phone started exploding. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. I pulled into a gas station, mostly to use the restroom and get Eli water. When I came back out, there were 23 new notifications. Dana, are you insane? Mom, call me immediately. Dad, you had no right. Dana again. You reported the tickets. I stared at that one. Then I realized. The tickets. Of course, I had not reported them. But the tickets had originally been purchased through my Disney account months earlier, when my mother announced this trip and asked me to book everything together since you're better online. I had assigned 1 ticket in Eli's name, 1 in mine, 4 in generic guest slots because my father didn't want to fuss with details yet. When my mother decided on her own to give Eli's ticket to one of the twins and use mine for Dana's husband's brother, who had come along last minute, the names and issue flags no longer matched the account records. Somewhere between the reassignment attempt and the mobile updates, Disney's system had flagged the altered set. I understood it the second I saw Dana's text at the gate. They had tried to use tickets that no longer lined up with the original linked party. And because I had already called customer support from the gas station to ask that our unused tickets remain inactive and that no one else be permitted to use Eli's or mine, the note on the account had escalated the mismatch. I hadn't done it to get them dragged by security. I had done it because I wasn't going to let them take what belonged to my child and hand it to someone else like it was normal. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Dana came in screaming, "How dare you do this to my kids?" I stood beside pump number 6, the desert wind, hot and dry, against my face. How dare I? They're crying, "Eliza." Security had to question us at the gate. My son cried in the car for an hour because your mother told him he wasn't worth a ticket. That is not what happened. It is exactly what happened. I heard her breathing go sharp. Then my mother got on the line. She must have been standing right there. You embarrassed this family in public. I looked through the windshield at Eli, sitting quietly with his water bottle in both hands. No, I said. You embarrassed yourselves. My father's voice boomed in from somewhere near the receiver. You've gone too far over a child who can't handle crowds. Something in me went cold. His name is Eli, I said, and you are done using my money to exclude him. Silence. Then my mother, smaller now, calculating. You moved the account. Yes. You canceled the roof deposit. Yes. There was a pause long enough for me to picture her doing the math. Then she said the one thing I knew she would. After everything we've done for you, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was always the same line, no matter what the facts were. I said, I'm not your backup bank. And I hung up. That should have been enough. It wasn't. By the time Eli and I got home, there were 42 missed calls and 2 long voicemails from my mother, both crying without ever once saying she was sorry. Dana sent photos of the twins looking upset in the parking structure, as if I was supposed to feel guilty for children being disappointed by their mother's behavior. My father left exactly 1 voicemail. You'll put that money back. This tantrum ends tonight. Tantrum. As if I hadn't calmly funded half their life while they practiced overlooking my son. That evening, my cousin April called. Not to lecture me. To tell me what happened after I left. Apparently, security did come over. The gate attendant had held the tickets and asked questions. Dana kept insisting they were theirs. My mother said there had to be some account mistake. One of the twins admitted Grandma gave them the tickets at breakfast because Aunt Eliza's kid doesn't like crowds. April said the security officer's face changed right then. Not dramatic. Just blank. Professional blank. And somehow that was worse because it turned the whole thing from family squabbling into what it really was. Adults taking a child's ticket and trying to use it anyway. April lowered her voice and said, I'm glad you left. I sat at my kitchen table while Eli colored silently in the next room. I should have left sooner. I said. Yes, she answered. But you left. That mattered. The next morning, my parents showed up. No warning, no invitation. My mother knocked once and then opened the storm door, like she still had the right. I stepped onto the porch before she could come farther. My father stood behind her in a golf shirt, jaw tight. Dana was there too, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy, arms folded across her chest. My mother started in immediately. This has gone on long enough. I said nothing. She tried again. We need to fix the roof payment today or we lose the contractor slot. Still nothing. My father spoke next. You made your point. My point. Not their cruelty. Not Eli. Just my point. As if we were discussing a dinner reservation, I'd canceled out of spite. Dana pulled off her sunglasses. The boys were humiliated. I looked at her and said, Okay, that shut her up for exactly 3 seconds. Then came the usual flood. I was bitter, vindictive, divorced too long, overprotective, teaching Eli to be fragile, letting him control the family. I let them talk until my son appeared behind the front curtain. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He was just there, small and quiet, seeing all of them on the porch and freezing in place. My mother noticed him and softened her face in that fake grandmother way she used for witnesses. Honey, Grandma didn't mean... No, I said. She looked back at me. I kept my voice even. You don't get to do that now. Not on my porch, not without an apology, and not while asking for money. My father exhaled hard through his nose. For God's sake! I stepped forward 1 inch. Not more. You are off my accounts. The weekly transfers are over. The roof is your problem. Dana's extras are your problem. I won't fund a family my son isn't part of. My mother's eyes filled instantly, but I had seen that movie before. So you're abandoning us? No, I said. I'm stopping. That landed harder than yelling would have because it was true. I wasn't setting fire to anything. I was just removing myself from the machine. Dana muttered. This is unbelievable. I said, You took his ticket. She opened her mouth. I didn't let her rewrite it. You took my son's ticket and handed it to your kids while he sat there and listened to Grandma say he didn't deserve to go. There is nothing to discuss until you can say that plainly. No one said it. Not one of them. My father told my mother to come on. Dana shook her head like I was hopeless. My mother lingered a second longer, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. Eventually, they left. I watched their car back out of the driveway, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt tired, but clean. The fallout kept coming. Texts from aunts asking me to keep peace. A cousin saying my father was under stress. My brother, who never offered money or help but loved opinions, suggested I could have handled it privately. I answered him once. They excluded Eli publicly. Then I blocked him for the weekend. The roofing company called 2 days later to confirm the cancellation was intentional. I said yes. My bank sent final confirmation that the shared account access had been updated. I saved the email in a folder called Closed. My Friday morning arrived, without the auto transfer going out. I made coffee and sat there in the quiet, waiting to feel panic. What I felt instead was relief. $250 stayed in my account. Then another Friday. Then another. Not enough to change my life overnight, but enough to remind me whose life I was actually responsible for. Mine and Eli's. The hardest part was him. He didn't ask much about Disneyland after that. Once, while I was folding laundry, he asked, Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me? I put down a towel and looked right at him. They are mad at me because I said no. He thought about that. Because of the tickets? Because of a lot of things. He nodded and went back to sorting socks. A week later, I found the Mickey ears still tucked in the suitcase pocket. I thought about throwing them away. Instead, I set them on his dresser. That Saturday, I took him to the aquarium in Phoenix. Not because it was equal to Disneyland. It wasn't. But because it was calm and cool and full of dim blue light and slow-moving things he loved, he spent 20 minutes sketching a jellyfish in the gift shop notebook I bought him. At lunch, he smiled. Really smiled for the first time since California. On the drive home, he said, "This was better." Maybe he meant it. Maybe he was trying to make me feel better again. Either way, I reached over and squeezed his knee. By August, the consequences had settled in. My parents got a cheaper roofing company and complained to anyone who would listen about being left stranded. Dana had to cancel the twins' fall sports trip because my father used that money to cover house repairs. My mother stopped calling every day, then every week, then almost not at all. What surprised me was who did keep showing up. April came over with pizza one Friday and told Eli to show her his latest drawings. My Aunt Lorraine, who had never once challenged my mother directly, mailed Eli a postcard from San Diego addressed to him alone. Even my father's sister called to say, very quietly, "I wish I'd said something years ago." That sentence stayed with me, because that was the whole thing, really. Years ago, it was never one ticket, never one breakfast table, never one cruel sentence about crowds. It was years of them deciding my child could stand slightly outside the circle as long as my money stayed in the middle of it. The quiet closure came in December. Not at their house. At mine. I put a small tree in the corner of the living room and let Eli decorate it however he wanted, which meant too many paper stars and a train ornament on the top branch because he said angels were overrated. We made cocoa. We left the music low. No one had to perform. I set 6 chairs around the dining table. Only 4 were used. Mine, Eli's, April's, Aunt Lorraine's. The other 2 stayed empty all evening. Not as a threat, not as theater, just truth. There had been places for my parents. They did not come. Eli didn't ask about them. After dinner, he handed me a folded piece of cardstock. On the front he had drawn our house with yellow windows and a crooked little tree in the yard. Inside, in his careful handwriting, he wrote, "This feels like family." I kept that card. Still have it tucked in the same drawer where I keep the bank confirmation from the day I closed everything down, because they belong together. One is proof of the boundary. The other is proof of why it had to happen. What I learned from all of it was simple, and I wish I had learned it sooner. People who use your kindness will call your boundary cruelty. People who benefit from your silence will call your voice disrespect. And people who can watch a child be humiliated and still ask for your money were never confused. They were comfortable. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the moment my son would stop wondering if he had done something wrong. That moment didn't come at Disneyland. It came later. At our own table. Under our own cheap lights. With empty chairs near the wall and his drawing in my hands. That was the first holiday I understood something clearly. Peace is expensive when you keep buying it for the wrong people. But once you stop paying for their version of family, you finally have enough left to build your own.